Hello and welcome to another episode of Cyber Diaries. We have another exciting guest with us today. We have Robert Wall from Evolution Jobs, uh, and we're going to cover some interesting topics today about recruitment, about essentially how recruitment industry is shaping, and it's wonderful to have you with us, Robert. So if you can do just a little introduction, and I guess if we can cover, what does Evolution Jobs do, and maybe a bit of your career journey into cybersecurity.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks for having me on, Amaris. Robert Wall from Evolution Recruitment. I'm the director for the security team here. I suppose Evolution as a business, we are a tech recruitment organisation. Been running for 24 years, so very well established in the market space. Mainly based out of the UK, but we do have offices out in the USA and Australia, Singapore, and Germany. But I suppose my part of the organisation is purely focused on cybersecurity and have been since I started there. Well over 15 years ago. So been a long journey within Evolution. My background, I came from a telecoms background myself, and I kind of almost found recruitment. Came in as a trainee. And just started within cybersecurity, started working with some of the vendors, like Sonic Wall when they were starting out in the UK, and helped them to build their security operations centers. And I generally stuck with it over the years, and obviously found myself where I am today, But yeah, I started out as in telecoms and just came up into security.
Yeah, it seems fascinating, obviously, how I guess technology, how it came leaps and bounds, especially over the last number of years, and Uh, how do you find? I guess I just wanted to pick up on that, and essentially journey into, how did you find your knowledge, coming into such a technological field, because obviously I see, people sometimes struggle because obviously it's cybersecurity is obviously not recruiting someone as, in finance or something. It requires a specific knowledge, and I see people, I guess over the years, people who've been and survive the industry as long as you did, 15, 16 years as you mentioned, obviously you have approached it in a good way, because there's a people, recruiters, especially now, they show up and then they disappear because obviously either lack of skills or trying to bypass the proper way of recruiting people.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite common that there is a jump about within recruitment, again, whether that's down to the individuals or the companies they work for. I can't comment on that, but Evolution do very well at supporting their people from a training and quality perspective. And a lot of our time, specifically at the start, there was a kind of a hunger for learning about as best as I could, be the best I could be. I came in from quite a senior position to join this business as a trainee, so I had it on my shoulders really to prove it to myself, and really take on board as much training and coaching. So when I joined alongside a lot of really good senior recruiters who taught me the ropes, and really kind of taught me through how to look at job specs and how to break down the key skills, and when speaking to clients, how to really get the key bits that you need to know to actually go out and find the right individuals. So it was a lot about the people I started with as much as sort of the effort that was put in to learn.
Yeah, and obviously because you've got a longevity of career, just wanted to, obviously, because we always touch a lot of technology, I just wanted to pick up a question as well. Do you see over the, say, last number of years in your career, does technology help in recruitment with coming of Zoom calls, LinkedIn, and how it popularized? Because obviously back in the day, it was paper CVs. It was probably calling people. Does technology help recruit better, or it doesn't?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it gives us a lot more access to people. We can technically meet people, rather than asking them to come either to the office or us to go and meet them. And it works on both sides for candidates and clients. But 100% technology definitely is driven a different way of working. We can be a lot more proactive as if you were to go out and meet some clients, for example, I could do 10 in a day by video, rather than maybe 2 or 3 in person, and then I would have to travel probably down to London or something for that. So it's taking a lot of that out of the role, I suppose. I mean, there's obviously still a place for face-to-face contact, but yeah, the advance of technology, both in video technology, but also things like LinkedIn, that wasn't around when I first came to do recruitment, and it became something that it is what it is now. And ultimately, it is a recruiter tool. It's obviously used by every recruiter in the marketplace. It's
Yeah, as you say, probably it definitely probably helps improve efficiency, because obviously, as you say, if you can meet 10 people instead of two, it makes a big difference. Obviously,
yeah.
you can probably build more relationships and understand more people.
Mhm.
Going into actual, talking about market, would you believe, what kind of unique challenges does your organization face in attracting top tier cybersecurity talent? Because obviously, I think there's a lot of, and I've seen over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, there was a proliferation of people leaving big cybersecurity companies and setting up their own practices. Obviously, field is very competitive. So how do you guys stay ahead of the competition?
I mean, I think ultimately it's I don't think there's much of a unique challenge that we say. I think everyone's fighting for the same talent. There's a limited pool of candidates out there. It's very well documented that there's obviously a big skills gap globally, and ultimately the competition for that talent is fierce across the board. And ultimately what we found of late, that the generalist job boards don't really bring back results anymore. So we're having to rely a lot more on I suppose a more targeted approach of us building our own networks and using our own network and actually going out and meeting people, and headhunting individuals has become a lot more of an essential skill to have as a recruiter nowadays. I mean, I suppose recently, probably the more of our bigger challenge has been competing with internal businesses due to the tech redundancies that happened specifically last year. It was a very tough business market across recruitment, and again, very well documented that it was a tough industry year for recruitment. There's a lot of businesses who didn't survive it. There's a lot of people in recruitment that were in and now got in house. So there's a lot of those kind of skills that you've honed as a 360 recruiter on the outside that have now got inside. And I suppose with all those redundancies going on, the competition for talent has come more from an internal perspective than anywhere else. It's definitely changed the way the market sits slightly.
You kind of touched it on, on generalist and specialization, and I wanted to pick up on that because I guess, if from talking from experience, what sometimes you look at job adverts and you sometimes struggle to understand what organization is trying to hire.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's probably a problem, having a recruiter who's maybe being a generalist, maybe using internal HR department to recruit for specific positions. So how do you see, for example, specialists coming in and delivering value, not only filling that position, but potentially maybe retaining the position as well? Because I see there's a few obviously problems is, if you are under describing or wrongly describing a position and potentially filling that position with the wrong talent, not only you are potentially, having the wrong person, but you potentially need to replace that person and then spend double amount of money to actually getting the right person.
Yeah, 100%. I suppose, I mean, if you look at it from a specialist perspective, we can generally look at a job spec and we know. I suppose we see some job specs that are 4 pages long, and it's really big, talking about every part of the organization. And realistically, at the start of every process, we obviously will try and have a conversation with the hiring manager to really kind of drill down to what those 5 to 10 key skills that this individual needs to see for me to actually present them to you. And I suppose a job spec itself is a bit of a shopping list, and it's always just a big raft of technologies, and you could have this, you could have that. In some cases, it's 3 or 4 jobs thrown into one pot, and it just won't work. You're never going to find that person, and kind of begs to wonder whether that's part of the reason why the skills gaps out there, because people are advertising these roles which technically you're never going to find the person for, but by the time it's been through the cycles, and obviously those people have identified, we as specialists can kind of dig into the technology a little bit more and talk to the hiring managers on a level where I suppose we obviously we know elements of it. I suppose not to the deep technical levels that you guys know, but we know enough to try and pull out the key skills that we need to go and find the right individuals for you. But using our networks, typically we've got built up networks and established networks in the marketplace, and it gives us a bit more of a brand in that space to attract candidates to come to us as well. So we can take candidates to market for the right sort of skills. But I suppose using that specialism does help us to break down the job specs a little better and actually understand the role and obviously what goes into the position itself.
Yeah. If we talk a bit about, I guess, relationship building with hiring managers, because obviously, see, sometimes job description, as you say, will come up as a shopping list.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you guys? Because obviously, sometimes you can see something that is, you probably have to find the balance between being it unrealistic and being a shopping list, because you can, I guess, gauge the, or from obviously experience seeing loads of job descriptions and obviously hiring the talent, you can see the reaction potential of being deterrent if you oversubscribe obviously the shopping list versus being in the right place. So how do you guys are very careful about coaching or working with hiring managers? How do you find that balance, making sure that people are not creating too much unrealistic shopping lists?
Yeah. I mean, I think the best way to look at it is being honest. I mean, I think if we look at a job spec and see the salary's not right, the location demands are, meaning that it's going to constrain the amount of candidates you can see. If there's certain parts of it which generally don't sit well, it's better for us to be upfront with that at the start and actually let them know that this we will run these basic searches for you. I mean, we do have some cases where a client will ask us for a particular tool. There's certain tool sets which are quite obscure and they need it because that's the tool they use right now. And if we run a search on our systems and it brings back 8 people in the last 2 years who've mentioned it, then we'd have to go digging a bit deeper with the individuals to see if they now have that skill. But we can generally get a picture straight away whether it's a possibility to find that individual. But yeah, it's honesty is the best policy always. If it's something that we've worked with before, which generally we have, we can advise what that market looks like and whether the chances of them finding that individual for the money they're looking for will work.
See, we had a big COVID, and I think that kind of changed the whole landscape of how the jobs are done. So I think we are sort of slowly going back to, or some organizations are pushing back to the office. So how do you see the competition for talent? Are companies that can offer fully remote work, they are at the advantage, or it's not really that important anymore? Because I see sometimes obviously people, and I talk to sometimes people, who are looking for a new role, and the main requirement is because obviously they might have had a fully remote role. They might have left, say, for example, London, or they're not close to anymore to one of the big hub cities. So they are sort of, they only can search for fully remote role because they're limited to where they currently live in, or circumstances and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we generally find that if a role is 100% on site, it always gets a bit of a negative reaction. I think people are accepting the fact that hybrid work is a thing. When COVID hit, I suppose we didn't have a lot of remote based opportunities or even hybrid roles. Most people were on site all the time, and that was expected. That was the normal. But when people tasted working from home and actually found that they could have a work-life balance and put their kids to bed at night, there's certain bits of your life that you probably took for granted, and then you've got that back, and all of a sudden it's kind of been pulled away from you again. It's always more difficult to take that away once it's been tasted, and I think that's what we see, that if a remote role comes up, we'll always get more applicants for it. So if a role is fully remote, or even if it's remote, but it's 1 day a week, you maybe have to go to the office, or 1 day a month, or 1 day a quarter, those sorts of positions always will get a better response to one that's 5 days a week. There's generally a lot less people out there willing to do that 5 day a week commute anymore,
Yeah.
And I suppose in some cases it depends on the role, of course, and the environment, and whether you can do the work remotely, but most roles can be done remotely nowadays, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes, I sometimes struggle to understand organizations' messaging, because it can be frustrating that, sometimes they'll require people to go to the office, and it feels like it's just for the sake of it, because the message would be, oh, we want people to communicate or to get together and share ideas. But the problem is, if you don't mandate the days that people go into the office, if one team comes on Monday and the other team on Wednesday, they're never going to meet. So there's pointless having this, push to the office presence
Yeah.
if you don't actually mandate, let's all go Tuesday and Wednesday so we can actually meet, instead of, oh, let's just go whenever, and what's the point? It just creates a frustration, I guess.
Yeah, I think it used to be that there was like, one of the big selling points was, well, we've got this big office with beanbags, and it's always that sort of thing. But that anymore, it just doesn't become a thing that people ask anymore. That people don't really ask what the office is. What's the office look like? Is there parking? All that sort of stuff. All the questions we used to get asked all the time. And it just doesn't come up anymore.
Yeah, and so I guess just coming on back of that, how do you see, for example, when organizations competing now for talent, aside from obviously monetary value, what do you see as terms of benefits, as in being competitive advantage that sometimes organizations can have, apart from obviously one of the main ones can be, yes, remote work, but what other, aside from, because we're not talking beanbags anymore, so what competitive advantages that organizations can have to actually attract talent?
I mean, there's obviously, I mean, the remote working element is something that's definitely there. It is it's a big factor for a lot of people. Most companies nowadays that I suppose are doing it well are looking after their people and actually listening to what the people want, and actually are if you start to push people away from, I mean, there's only one way they're going to go, is just out the door. But I suppose looking after your individuals and your business, specifically from a growth perspective, training is very important. Make sure your people feel valued, and there's some sort of programs that they can see that they are seeing some sort of personal or professional growth, working for you as a business, and that there's some sort of career path for them. In some cases, people are moving on from companies because they don't feel like there's a way up. They've hit this glass ceiling that they can't see a way past the boss. There's no other opportunities for them. They might want to do mentoring and coaching, but there's no opportunities to do so. But obviously, yeah, the money side of thing always comes up. It's it's something that people, I think that the packages that people get offered out there's not enough work done by organizations to stay close to what the industry averages are. It's quite typical that a candidate who's maybe worked in a company for 10 years, maybe on a certain salary, and it will be great because they've got the little kicks up every year. Somebody who's jumped jobs every 2 years, and over that same period, they'll be on good 10,000, 15,000 more than the individual who stayed where they are. And that's just, it's common. That's what we see all the time. So when we looked at as a job hopper, actually financially, they'll be better off. That's the way it is.
It's really interesting to see, because I obviously as well know quite a few examples worked before in the big organizations where they will use, for example, a salary benchmark that, say, for example, is 2 years out of date, and then they will wonder why they can't attract talent.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, obviously in technology, 2 years is a massive amount of time if you're benchmarking, and as well knowing where to benchmark to, because I think it's an important post Stu Hurst from made recently about salaries, because if you compare someone's statistics, like somebody posted, CW Jobs has an average CISO salary at £67,000. I was like, if you try and benchmark that, pull up and try to fill that role. So I guess it's very important where you get your data. And secondly, I don't remember where from. I had an argument with someone on LinkedIn as well, where they were mentioning about, oh, it's not correct that my view was that average CISO UK salary is about 180K, because they found somewhere a data point that disagreed with it. But I was like, if you want to argue, find at least 10 data points so you have something to go by, not just one to negate, and say it's fact.
Yeah. I think whenever you're doing benchmarking, it's something I recommend to everybody is go to somebody who works in that market and is not pulling data from CW Jobs or from one of the job boards, because those salaries that are on there are kind of, again, there's a swing on it of possibly 20, 30 grand, and it's one of those things. If you want accurate data, go to an agency that's placing those people, and they'll be able to give you accurate data of what people are being placed at, and we will get a pulse from various companies across all different technology sectors, all different markets, and we can pull together the data that's live and real, and I say has been means tested. There's a lot of stuff that we see online. It's the same with IT Jobs Watch and a few other bits like that they have reasonable data, but again, it's pulled from job boards in some cases. So the data isn't always exact to what it is. But if you speak to a specialist who works in that field, you need to know what sort of salary a SOC engineer is getting in leads, and come to someone who understands what that market looks like and works it. Because we can give you the actual data of what that salary will be.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to pick up. Obviously, we talked a bit about technology, but if we kind of flip a point a bit in towards maybe threats, but combining that with technology, do you see that, for example, big news headlines based on, big breaches or new advancements in technology now with AI, does that change perspective and potential prospect roles that your clients are looking for to fill? Like, do you have any need now for, because obviously AI is becoming very popular. So is there potentially a need for AI security personnel now?
I would say so. I mean, I think it's going to become more prevalent that we see that out there. I mean, definitely around AI, automation, machine learning, and all those different technologies. As you know, security just tends to follow the trends of IT. I mean, as tech changes, someone needs to be there to secure it. And as these new technologies come along, if we don't keep up, then there's gaps, and that's where people get in. But it's definitely there's talk around. Definitely that's becoming more of a conversation piece with the customers around AI and automation. There's definitely going to be more people specializing into different fields of security. I think that's the only way we could truly crack these things, because some of the areas are very technical. They're definitely coming out of the realms of a box on a when it's plugged into your server. Obviously there's a few other areas that we keep hearing rumbles about: quantum computing, obviously the threats that potentially comes along with it. And that I think the biggest issue we're going to find is that as these technologies advance, and it will charge on quickly, as it always does, the skills gaps are just going to keep growing. And unless people are willing to adapt and train the people and actually stay on board with the fact that if you're taking in new technology, you need people there to secure it, or at least someone who can advise how to secure it. But that's definitely that we always see that. I mean, definitely the automation part and the AI part is definitely something that's becoming a conversation piece.
I definitely see that, because I see a lot of organizations now are jumping onto the AI hype and they want to leverage it in some way. But actually, people having skills to secure AI is much smaller pool than the organizations who are willing to use AI, and that actually creates a big gap. And as we say, that's the thing, is it's very interesting to see how it shapes, because people keep talking about skills gap, and skills gap is not at the junior level. There's plenty of people who are willing and working hard to enter the industry, but it separates in specific niches how technology, because adoption happens so fast, and I guess that's the key point. It's very hard to keep up.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
We saw the same thing with when DevOps became a key thing that was either DevSecOps came along, and then if we get a requirement, a few years back, when it was kind of in that area, finding someone who did DevSecOps would have been quite difficult. But now there are people, and there's I suppose a reasonable amount of people who've picked that up. But there's a lot more movement in those areas. Same when cloud came along. There was obviously now there's plenty of cloud security people, but back then there wasn't. And it was as technology keeps moving, security tends to follow suit. And that's what we're seeing as a trend across the market, really.
Yeah. I just wanted to flip a bit and going away from technical skills. I guess I've always been a proponent of, yes, obviously skills are very important, but for me in my head, I always hired people for their attitude, aptitude, and their cultural fit. And in technology, normally in my head, obviously you need to have a grounding and things like that, but most of the technology you can learn on a job. I can't teach you your attitude and aptitude. So how you guys are, helping organizations to assess, cultural fit? Do you have, do companies come with specific requirements? How you can, how can you shortlist candidates? So I guess, how you helping companies, and at the same time, how can candidates think about preparing for those, conversations?
Yeah, I suppose most of our companies, we try and work with them in a bit more like a partnership anyway, and we try and get to know the organizations kind of more intimate level, basically. Trying to go out and meet the people, see the sites, and understand questions around obviously what their culture is and what the business is moving towards, what their kind of core values are. And obviously it helps us to, I suppose, to try and align and, look at the fit and the dynamics and the teams that are in the business there. But I suppose an example, if you working for a startup and it's all a young team there, then obviously that team goes out, they go out socializing all the time and stuff like that. I mean, we need to know that that is the case, because if we put someone in there who doesn't want that straight away, then they might be a perfect fit technically, but they're never going to fit into the team, and they'll never gel with them because they're not part of the clan, So it's important that we ask questions about not just how the team is from a technical level and what technical skills they need to come with, but also, what that office environment's like, and what are the day-to-day like what is day-to-day like in the office itself. But we do ask questions from the customers to say, what are your cultural values, and are there any questions you would like us to ask the candidates that we can present to you with the CVs, to try and obviously get those details, at the source, but obviously try and get a best way of us describing what that culture looks like for them internally. I mean, there's certain clients who possibly have people in the business themselves that kind of are, I suppose, that they encompass the culture, and maybe get them involved in interviews so they can work with, to actually assess that as part of the interview process. But I mean, there are tools that you can use for testing on this sort of thing, but I'll be honest with you, the human approach is always the best one in my mind, But yeah, I think it's just generally, if you know the business themselves and you've worked with someone closely for a number of years, you can get a feel. Again, using video helps because you can technically meet the person, and actually get to know them a bit better. But yeah, I think that's generally the way we kind of approach things,
Yeah, and then on the back of that, how do you think that companies, or what strategies companies could use, to retain their top talent?
Mm-hmm.
Because we talked a bit about money, about training, but I guess in this market when it's become competitive and skill gaps showcases itself, it becomes a competition, or all companies trying to poach away the talent. So how can
Yeah.
organizations help themselves to secure and retain that talent?
I mean, I think it's, again, we've probably touched on it a bit as well. I mean, I think amongst other reasons, there's probably three main reasons why people do move on from a business. And first one's usually salary, second one usually is training progression, and the third one probably is the remote working element. That hybrid working. It's something that, listening to your people and actually understanding the reasons why people are moving on, and staying in touch with the sort of trends in the marketplace, specifically around the salaries. As we mentioned, there's definitely a raft of information out there. You can get sources to make sure your people are looked after, because make no bones of it, they're getting approached 10, 20 times a day from other agencies that are trying to, or even direct companies trying to take those people out. There's always those gaps that are going to be pulled from. It's always like robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's that sort of situation. But the growth within their businesses themselves, if people feel like they're being invested in and they can see that there's a path there for themselves in the organization, that they won't have a reason to pick the phone up. They won't have a reason to reply to our LinkedIn message. But you can't please everybody. But at the same time, if you don't understand your people and don't know what makes them tick and what their drivers are, both internally and externally, it could be that they want to get the next house, or they've got aspirations to become a CISO one day. Work with them. Let's see if we can put a plan together. Say, well, okay, well, let's over the next 12 months, we can put you through these courses, or we can work with you, or you can shadow people. You can, do whatever you need to do to obviously keep that person feeling like they're being valued and actually challenged in the
I think
workplace.
sometimes this is very overlooked because I know some organizations, obviously you can't compete on salary front, because I remember where I read a really interesting story about Netflix, because Netflix used to have a rule. I don't know if it's still there, but I know a few years ago they used to have a rule. So if they hire someone new from outside into an organization, and they say, for example, let's say their salary is 10 grand more than everyone else in that department, they will bump everybody else's salary, because they will say that's the new benchmark, because obviously someone negotiated more. So
Yeah.
obviously it's hard to compete with that, but
Mm.
I think that's why there is a popular saying, people don't leave companies, they leave bad managers.
Yeah.
Your core responsibility as a manager is to create a culture of collaboration, of support, and I guess of job safety, and essentially support that person. I always say, if someone has an aspiration, you want, if somebody wants to be in in higher position, you need to support them. Some people, I guess, become uncomfortable because they think that their junior might come for their job one day.
Yeah, I get it.
But if you want the best for your people, that's fine. You can move on and let them flourish in that role. So
Yeah, it's about once obviously getting to know your people and actually understanding where their strengths are, because there may be stuff that they do very well that they're just not aware of. It's just something they do on a day-to-day basis, and it's there may be some values that they have and some of their sort of attributes that do lend themselves towards leadership, and they might think that they can't lead people, but they've never had the chance to. So
yeah,
it's like having those opportunities to keep people keep people fresh. I think that's the thing. As soon as someone goes stagnant and it becomes a bit, they feel like they've got nowhere to go. There's nowhere to climb. They're not advancing in any way. Especially if someone's in a tech role and they're just expected to work on the tech that's in the business themselves. There's no real advancement, and there's all this new technology coming out. They're not even seeing a thing from it.
yeah.
It kind of that could be another thing where people kind of I feel like I'm going a bit stagnant.
I think what really transforms, and from my experience, what transforms people is giving accountability, giving people to own parts of, whether it's part of your program, whether parts of, a domain of your program, and let them run with it,
Yeah.
support them, but give them something to look after. Now, if we flip, we obviously talked a bit about companies, we talked about strategies. Now, if we flip into the talent, side of the business, you know, there's a few conversations we can probably go into, but starting with, we sometimes see, roles and you have 300 applicants, and people sometimes obviously are deterred from applying. But I guess from your experience, just I wanted to ask you a few words. I know myself when I, posted roles, probably 50% are from another country, which are
Mm-hmm.
straight away disqualified. Some of them are not even anywhere close to having skills. So sometimes
Yeah.
out of 100, maybe you have only 10 that are sort of qualified that you need to look at their CVs.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, A, how would you say that people shouldn't be deterred and always apply? And B, how can they differentiate themselves from the rest of the people when they apply for the roles?
I think it's. I mean, you're right about the applicants. I mean, we see it all the time. We have roles that are very specific, maybe have a certain clearance requirement, and again, we get hundreds of applicants come through that are not from this country, and we can't put them through that role because of the clearance requirement. For instance, it happens all the time. But again, it's the same thing from our side of things. When we try and speak to a client, they go, "Oh no, we've had loads of people applying for the role." But how many of them are relevant? How many actually are you going to speak to? Because for their hiring manager, it's never going to sit and sift through 200 profiles. You just haven't got the time to do it. But it's one of those things, I suppose, from a candidate perspective, to stand out. I mean, yeah, by all means, do apply if you are right for the role, do so, and obviously reach out to the person who's doing it. Don't just submit. Put a case together as to why you're right for the role. There's always, especially on LinkedIn, it's always a bit more of a broken down CV. I've got broken down job profile, sorry. So there's always a kind of key skills section on there, and try and sort of pull out why you match that. Just give a bit more of a personal approach to it. You could even approach that it usually says on there, this role reports to the CISO. So why not approach the CISO and say, well, I've just applied for this role, just so you know, here's my CV and the opportunity to speak to you. But it's definitely worthwhile applying, regardless of how many applicants are on there, because trust me, that there's a lot of irrelevant people apply for roles.
Yeah.
A lot.
I always say to people as well, LinkedIn obviously changed the way people, I guess, apply for jobs. But secondly, as well, it comes to a point where I think sometimes, in a way, yes, as you say, applying is good, but sometimes I even say to people, sometimes applying might not be the best tactic. I always say, build relationships, get some recruiters in your corner,
Mhm.
because instead of you applying and competing with thousands of people, jobs will come to you when you have a network of people, because they obviously will be talking to hiring managers and they will know outright, sometimes even before the role goes public, they'll say, look, my client's looking for that particular role, that's the spec, would you open to discussing it? And I think you can bypass quite a few tiers in that search. And I guess from client perspective, guys, when you're sending profiles to hiring managers, you obviously select, say, anywhere from 3 to 5.
Mhm.
What determines, are you just looking at CV? What determines what you guys select? Because obviously, I assume there's a combination of things, but how can people stand out and making sure that obviously they are selected?
I mean, I suppose that from our side, again, as I'm sure you've seen hundreds of CVs in your time, some of them are well written, some of them are a bit more concise. I'm not saying a two-pager, because I think that's ridiculous in some cases. You can't expect someone to squash 20 years into one page of a CV. It just doesn't work. But at the same time, don't send a 10-pager because it has an opposite effect. I mean, I suppose, looking at, I suppose from our side, if we can see from the CV the sort of concrete examples of where you've gone in and actually changed the posture of a cyber business, or you've actually showing where you've actually added some sort of value into the organization, whether it's leading successful incident management response or anything like that sort of nature, but some sort of detail in the CV to show what you do and what you've done in your role. It always helps. But I think from our side of things, we're always looking for, I suppose, most people won't read a full CV. I'll just be open with you. It's a case you'll read the top part of the CV. This is a little bit about me and what I do. Here's my core skills, and then you start reading about the roles and what they're doing day to day. And if that person isn't hitting the mark for you on the first 2 or 3 jobs, you probably lost the reader straight away. If I sent that to a hiring manager, that's exactly what they would do. They would. So we try and train it out. But what we do with all of our CVs, we document the conversation that we have with the candidates and pull out the reasons why that person is good for the role and the perfect fit. And for us to submit them to the role itself, we only try and do that off the basis that they are a fit for the role. So we're not in the habit of just sending mud and just plug them and see what sticks.
Yeah.
But that's part of our role as an agent, is to try and draw out that experience. And actually, if it's not detailed on the CV, maybe get them to write it on the CV, and just try and pull in those bits of detail. And but ultimately, if we can detail what we always put a cover sheet on a profile and detail the conversation that we have. And in some cases, we can ask the client to ask, there's certain questions they would like us to ask the candidate. We can record that, snip it, and send it with the interview. So then we're technically conducting a mini interview with the CV submission, to try and match that up. But there's definitely different ways of doing it. But I think from our side, using an agency like ourselves, we can pull out that information from his profile and try and sort of put it to the front.
Yeah, I think I always find that, and I've been doing some, mentoring. I always find that people struggle to, usually CVs consist of somebody's responsibilities.
Mhm.
And that doesn't tell me much as a hiring manager. I want to see. So, for example, I always give people examples like, I've used A and B vulnerability management tool.
Mhm.
Well, that doesn't tell me much. What did you do with it?
What to do
Or,
with it? Yeah.
when somebody says, oh, I've used this tool and therefore I reduced the vulnerabilities by this amount of percentage and our posture or reduce the risk and this,
Mhm.
when you put why and you can create tangible events, what happened, how does that change?
Yeah.
It completely changes your CV. And I think that's somewhere where, people struggle. Or secondly, as well, sometimes, I always talk to junior people is when you have about yourself, sometimes obviously people don't have responsibilities or didn't have exposure to those tools, maybe in an enterprise grade.
Mhm.
But if you have your home lab, put that what you actually done, what scenarios you try to address and develop your skills.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of the things that's definitely overlooked, that people tend to put like just they're a Splunk specialist, but okay, well, what does that mean? Are you just using the SIEM tool? If they put on an extra, dashboard creation and all that sort of stuff, it means that they're the next level. They've kind of gone a bit deeper than just someone who's a user, So it's definitely worthwhile spending a bit of time on your CV just to kind of give a bit more context into what you're actually doing with the tools that that you've been using.
Yeah, and especially showcasing. Some people even add. You can add a portfolio of your work and things like that, and that can always transcend and transform. And I always say to, for example, I remember back in the day, I got a few jobs as well because I was either presenting or my hiring manager saw my YouTube video, which obviously doing something extra and showcasing your passion
Hmm.
can help because you mentioned that exactly, and that's one of the things I always say. There's two ways I always see. one of the things I always ask candidates, especially at the more junior spectre, is what's your next training plan for the next 6 to 12 months?
Mm.
And then secondly, obviously, I will always expect them to ask me, how am I, or how us as organization will support you in your personal training and development.
Mhm.
Because obviously, it's even though I know it's very important to balance burnout and obviously people, it's very the job can be very demanding. By showing that you are able to constantly develop, because cybersecurity changes so fast, you can't the skills that you have today, if you don't do anything for the next couple of years, you're going to be left behind.
Mhm.
And that's the reality. And sometimes it's harsh reality, but you have to keep up. You obviously don't have to do crazy, because we know mental health and everything you have to balance. You can't do 24/7.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do as well. They take themselves out of that comfort zone of just sitting behind the computer and actually get out and network with people. Go to meetups. A lot of the time there's things that are out there that are free. Go and speak to people. Go and sit and listen to speakers at events and stuff, because those guys are generally clued up, and they're on the pulse of that new stuff that's coming out. So again, it could give you an idea that actually that sounds interesting. Let's explore that. And working with those sort of professional groups, and getting involved in those communities. So that's one thing you just got to be mindful of, is making sure the interactions is a good one. Obviously, I know some people like to see the world burn, but there's a lot of people that we see kind of pushing out these controversial comments out there. But we have seen that before, where that's got in the way of someone being offered a position because their comments seemed a little little extreme, shall we say?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's about balance, isn't it? Because obviously, some people showcase and obviously want to help and support junior talent, and some people obviously want to share, vanity metrics and obviously share clout, and sometimes obviously it leads people in the wrong directions. But I always say, I think meeting people is amazing, because, for example, when I was working with Capstock and mentoring new people, I said, go in a conference. I said, for example, if you want to land a job in SOC, one of your main tools you're going to work with is SIEM.
Mhm.
So go and talk to a couple of SIEM vendors, ask them about how their SIEM works. See if you can more understand, and get a couple of people in your corner who you can just chat to. It's building relationships, and I think one thing is worth mentioning. I think cybersecurity is unlike any industry I've been in before, because cybersecurity, there's so many people who are willing to dedicate their time to help a stranger. You just need to ask. As long as you're not being, a dick about it, and you are being asking nicely, and you actually are interested, there's so many people that will dedicate and give you their time
Yeah.
to actually, help and support you. There's various communities, whether it's, as you say, Discord, whether it's LinkedIn, there's WhatsApp groups, there is Facebook learning groups of people, who doing the courses, like Security Plus, Professor Messer, and all of these groups, who do tremendous work for people. So I guess to kind of summarize, and if we look into the recruitment future, we kind of touched a bit. Last year was bad. This year seemed like it woke up a bit and then it kind of died down. How do you see recruitment sort of industry shaping over the next year or two?
I mean, it's from I suppose the early indications is kind of it's going to be a slow climb back up to I mean, again, possibly not to levels of sort of 2022, but again, it's I think there'll definitely be a slow kind of climb back up. But again, there's obviously a lot of factors in that, with the elections and budgets and all that sort of stuff. So that will have an impact in certain spend, which obviously kicks into some of the larger corporates who do employ a lot of people. So there's a lot can be it'd be interesting to see what happens after the election itself, to see how that has an impact. But we're expected to see a kind of slow climb for the rest of the year, and hopefully getting back to some sort of normality from the end of the year going into next. I think that's probably what to expect.
Oh, great. Well, brilliant. That was our episode number 7, and I'm really grateful for Robert to sharing, his knowledge and showcasing, a bit opening, the curtain about how recruitment works, how us, as people looking for potentially new roles can, learn a few tips, and obviously helping organizations to find that talent. So once again, thank you very much, Robert, for being with us.
No problem. Thank you very much for your time.
Brilliant. Thank you.